Hey everyone, welcome back to Great Northwest Weaponry. This is Thomas, and today we are taking a look at the Smith Wesson Model 1917. This is an awesome gun. This was actually, I think, my first revolver. Definitely my first World War I piece that I ever acquired in my collection. And yeah, it's beautiful. I've mentioned to you guys actually in the last video that I kind of have a thing for revolvers. This is why. You could pretty directly blame this gun. So, a little bit on the history of the Model 1917. The gun was initially adopted in 1917 and production went until 1920. But during World War I alone, about 163,500 were made by Smith & Wesson. About 300,000 total if you include Colt's Model 1917, but there are differences. If we ever get a Colt Model 1917, we'll look at that, because they're not really based on the same lineage. The Smith & Wesson Model 1917 is actually based on the Smith & Wesson's second model in 455 Webley. Through 1915 and 16, the U.S. had been, or Smith & Wesson specifically, had been making Smith & Wesson second models, or Model 2. I don't remember the nomenclature. I'll post right there. But they'd been making those for the British and the Canadians, but in anticipation of U.S. involvement in World War I, which was ongoing at that time, the president of Smith & Wesson, I believe his name was Joseph Wesson. Again, if I'm wrong, over here. You guys know the drill. But he stepped up development of what they had been working on for a while, which was the Model 1917. At the time, it really wasn't known as that until it was officially released, but they had been trying to develop a gun based on the Model 2 that was built to withstand the pressures of 45 ACP, which was the standard U.S. government issue handgun cartridge. So they were searching for government contracts, and they got it. 1917 model revolvers between Colt and Smith & Wesson outnumbered Colt 1911s by about 2 to 1 in the field, from what I've read. So they're very cool guns. They're really quite valuable. I got stupidly lucky on this when I found it. The store that had it, for one, didn't really know what it was, and for two, there was this terrible aftermarket grip installed on the gun that blocked the bottom plate of the gun, of which we'll take a look at here in a moment when we go to the table. But it blocked the U.S. Army model of 1917 stamp. I knew kind of what I was looking at when I saw it, asked them to remove the grips, and lo and behold, 1917. So I wanted it. And also for any of you movie buffs, Indiana Jones in Raiders of the Lost Ark is packing a 1917. His is a modified one, I think it was just the civilian model, but it's a shorter barrel and the grips are textured. So yeah, if you're a movie buff, this is your Indiana Jones gun, at least from Raiders of the Lost Ark. He used several different revolvers throughout the series. But yeah, it's an awesome piece. It's a double action. The double action pull is fairly heavy, but not terrible. Single action pull is really light and smooth. And it is a side eject, and it is fed with moon clips. I actually kicked them out on the ground. We'll take a look at those when we get over to the table because I don't know where they went. So yeah, let's go ahead and do that. So we mentioned a couple things in the last segment that I want to take a look at right off the bat. First, this stamp marking, the U.S. Army Model 1917. That and the U.S. property mark basically are where the value in these guns lays. So as I'd mentioned, I did not have the original grips, so these are reproduction grips. I've been working on getting some original 1917 grips for a very long time, but these are a nice reproduction. They are correct, they're period correct, with the steel screw, brass insert, and walnut. This is a very low serial number. As you can see, we're just over the 1,000 serial number range, which probably puts it at first year of production, which is freaking sweet. Other thing we mentioned that I want to take a look at right away is these Halfmoon Clips. So these are fairly significant in the Halfmoon Clips are what were used in World War I. So these are empty ones. They just go like so, and loaded. So Smith & Wesson patented the Halfmoon Clip for the 45 ACP in particular, but the U.S. government stepped in and forced them to make the Halfmoon Clips widely available for production by Colt as well, because they were both making these 45 ACP revolvers, and they didn't want one company to have a monopoly on an essential piece. So there's your little bit on Halfmoon Clips. Later on, full moon clips were available to the public. I don't use these for the videos as much, just for authenticity's sake, but they are faster because you've got the full 6 and it's just one movement instead of 2 movements. Now, I also had mentioned the double and single action. So the single action, as I said, is very smooth. The single action pull is about 5 to 6 pounds, just depending on the condition of the gun, but it feels really nice, and it's in a very natural spot. I've had some revolvers where the trigger is kind of weird to access. This is not one of them. Double action pull is around 8 to 10 pounds, so it is definitely an increase, but it's not hideous. Again, I've had much worse ones. For instance, something like a what's called Enfield No. 2 revolver is something like a 15-pound trigger pull. Same with the double action on your Nagant revolvers can be as bad as 18-pound trigger pull. They're an absolute nightmare to shoot. For that reason, I do enjoy shooting them, but they are a pain. Another cool thing I've got with this guy is an original leather holster. Now, this was not probably the one that was issued with this gun, considering I got this later from a different location. I actually picked this up from my friends at the Warfront. I've talked about them a few times. So this is another cool piece that they hooked me up with, kind of helped finish out the kit between, you know, gun, holster, Halfmoon Clips, the whole kit and caboodle. So, yeah. Let's go ahead and shoot this thing some more. So I'd already mentioned that the 1917 was developed originally in 1916 and kind of released and adopted in 1917. Smith & Wesson themselves kind of controlled the production of these for about a year. As you know, you would expect when a company releases a gun, they kind of control the production. However, by September of 1918, the U.S. government stepped in to kind of take over production with both Smith & Wesson and Colt, I might add, just to boost numbers, and because things were getting a little more dire and we were intrinsically involved in the war by this point. So that's when you see the biggest boost in production numbers is for a few months in mid to late 1918. That's when most of these guns were produced. And that also is why, with the low serial number, I would assume that this is a 1917 production. Because if it was 1918, production took off then. So, yeah. It's a very cool piece. Let's shoot it some more. I've got a couple of nifty little Halfmoon Clips in my pocket. Here we go. I'm going to do 3 single action, 3 double action. Target we've got out here today doesn't really ring. It's got several holes in it, but I'd probably hit about 4 out of the 6 there, so not my best, not my worst. The double action on this is, this gun just kind of is a bear in every way, really. For one, these were like very seriously overbuilt, so much so that they saw service all the way up until Vietnam. You can actually find pictures online of tunnel rats in Vietnam packing these, because they're unstoppable. And this gun is probably about 103 years old, and it works flawlessly. I am just so happy with it, so happy I found it, and like I say, it kind of kicked off the revolver obsession, which is a lot of why I have a YouTube channel. So, yeah, one of my favorite pieces. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. It's been Thomas with Great Northwest Weaponry, and I'll see you next time.